Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. In this video, you will learn about the function of insulin, glucagon, as well as adrenaline. And in the last part of this video, we'll go through what will happen when you have some issue with insulin. So the lesson objective of this video is you need to be able to explain how blood glucose level is regulated by insulin and glucagon, which actually we have gone through this before. The second objective is something new, the role of adrenaline in boosting our blood glucose level, as well as you need to give situation as to when we might need it. And lastly is about diabetes. So just take note of what you need to learn about diabetes, because it might get too medical and you actually don't have to be so medical about it. You just need to be able to describe the sign, which is increased blood glucose level as well as there's glucose inside your urine, and how we treat diabetes. But first, let us go through some classification of hormones that will go a long way in helping you to recall what is the function of each of the hormones. So endocrinologists, or expert in endocrine gland, classify hormones as anabolic as well as catabolic hormones. So this word anabolic and catabolic actually kind of appeared at the front of your textbook, but it's actually not important. But now I bring this up because it actually can help you to recall what is the function, so that you do not get them mixed up. So let's start with the word catabolic. Catabolic comes from the word catastrophe. Catastrophe, that means disaster, things breaks down. So for hormones that is catabolic, they actually cause the breakdown of molecules. Anabolic hormones cause the building up of stuff or molecules. So the anabolic hormones is insulin, and the catabolic hormones are glucagon as well as adrenaline. Insulin, as all of you have learned, will trigger the formation of glycogen from glucose. So it causes the building up of molecules. Glucagon, on the other hand, all of you also know that they cause the breaking down of glycogen into glucose. And the same for adrenaline, causing the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. Here I need to emphasize something. Unlike enzyme, for hormones, they will trigger the effect. That means they are some sort of signal for the cell to build or break down the molecules. It is not insulin will cause glucose to turn into glycogen. It is insulin will trigger the formation. Glucagon will not break down, it will trigger the breaking down. Lastly, some additional information. Now, you might think that catabolic is bad, anabolic is good, because destroying is bad, building up is kind of good. But just keep in mind that building up fats is actually not good. It will cause you to become the biggest city in the world. So let us move on to the more detailed aspect of the function. So for insulin and glucagon, they actually have opposite effect. So insulin will trigger the cell to convert glucose into glycogen, while glucagon will trigger the cell to convert glycogen to glucose. Now, I'm writing them this way as a summary, but keep in mind that it is not insulin that go and enzyme glucose into glycogen. No, that is not what is happening. What is happening is insulin will trigger the cell, or insulin is like a message to the cell to do the appropriate thing to cause the glucose to turn into glycogen. Glucagon is the reverse. It carries the message of glucagon is the reverse. It contains the message of converting glycogen into glucose. It is just a message, it is not the worker. So insulin target our liver, muscle, as well as fat tissue. So insulin will trigger the glucose uptake, increase glucose metabolism, which is a way of saying respiration, and increase the conversion of glucose into glycogen. Now, please take note, the increase is important. It doesn't cause the glucose to be converted into glycogen, it increases the conversion by serving as a message to the cell. Some additional info, like I mentioned earlier, it increases the uptake of fatty acid and fat synthesis in fat tissue. So insulin might not be such a goody two-shoes. And the effect of insulin is it decreases blood glucose concentration until it is normal level. The thing that I want to highlight here is normal level. It doesn't just decrease blood glucose concentration. The key thing is also to emphasize it decreases until normal level or normal range. For glucagon, it targets the liver and causes the opposite effect of insulin. It increases the conversion of glycogen into glucose, increase the conversion of fats as well as amino acid into glucose, and increase the release of glucose into our blood. So as a result, our blood glucose level will increase until normal level. Again, those hormones is just to cause the blood glucose level to return to normal level. So right now you might see, wow, like so many things to memorize. But I'm here to help. Actually, I think most of you are actually familiar with diabetes. And the Chinese and the Malay name of diabetes, basically the Chinese is 糖尿病. Tang and niao is sugar and urine. And I believe for Malay is the same. Sugar in urine. Why are there glucose in their urine? Is because there's just so much glucose in their blood plasma. And when those glucose are filtered out, because the level is very high, the convoluted tubule as well as loop of Henle cannot reabsorb so much of the glucose. So as a result, some of them will flow through the collecting duct and appear in our urine. And if you have some general knowledge, diabetic patient needs some insulin shot. So from this relation, you can see that diabetic patient, they have high sugar level inside their blood and they take insulin. So what is the effect of insulin? To reduce their blood glucose level lah. So if you have the general knowledge of diabetic patients requires insulin shot, you should be able to figure out all of this. Because you actually just have to remember one. Since glucagon is just the opposite, you just have to remember one, then apply the opposite for the other hormones. So let's just go through this for the third time. Blood glucose level will increase. Isolate of Langerhans in the pancreas will detect the increase in blood glucose level. Insulin will be released. Insulin will affect our liver as well as muscle. And the cell will increase glucose uptake as well as metabolism, convert glucose into glycogen, as well as increase respiration. As a result, blood glucose level will fall to normal level. Why blood glucose level might increase might be because you have drank Coke, or maybe you just eaten a lot of carbohydrate. When blood glucose level decrease, maybe you are fasting, or it has been some time before your last meal, blood glucose level will decrease. Isolate of Langerhans will detect the decrease and release glucagon. And the effect of glucagon on liver is it increases the conversion of glycogen into glucose, fats and amino acid into glucose as well, and the glucose will be released into blood. So since glucose is released into the blood glucose level will return to normal. This one, by now, you should be familiar with. And the last hormone for today is adrenaline. For adrenaline, it's called the fight or flight response. Flight meaning you run off. So some of you might have heard of adrenaline rush. That means you get very excited for good or bad reason. In this example, you can see that a man saw a snake. What will happen is the brain will sense the danger and signal will be sent to the adrenal gland for it to release adrenaline. And the effect of adrenaline will enable the man to be more fighting ready or more escape ready. So action of adrenaline, there's actually quite a few. It will cause the liver to convert glycogen into glucose, a catabolic effect, breaking down of molecules. It will increase our oxygen uptake, that means we will breathe faster as well as heavier. Increase the rate of heartbeat and blood pressure. Increase metabolic rate or our tissue respiration. It will also increase the size of our pupil. Pupil is the black color thing that you see in our eyes. If you are unaware, the pupil can actually increase and decrease in size, allowing more or less light to enter. In the case of dilation, it is allowing more light to go in so that we can see clearer. It will also increase the rate of blood clot, because if we get into a fight or we are escaping, we might start bleeding. And blood clot is important so that we will not lose too much blood during the fight. It will reduce the blood going to our stomach, because when we are fighting, who cares about whether we are digesting food or not? And lastly, our hair muscle will stand up on its end. So for this, you can see that to allow us to have more energy for fight or flight, we get more glucose, we get more oxygen. Increased heartbeat is to ensure oxygen and glucose can be transported as fast as possible to the muscle. So what's the effect of adrenaline? So effect of adrenaline, quite similar to glucagon. Increase the blood glucose concentration, so more blood will be flowing to the muscle. And like I said earlier on, oxygen and glucose will be transported more rapidly to our muscle to release energy in tissue respiration. And because our pupil dilate, it allows more light to enter, we will be able to see more clearly, because we do not want to trip and fall, like all horror movie. Okay, lastly, let's talk about an important graph for you to appreciate these three hormones. So I have a graph that shows the change in blood glucose level or glucose range. There are a few important parts which I want you to take note. First is the first slope that is going down. Second is this slope that is going up. to normal level. Then lastly is the one that is going higher than normal level. Now, each of these 1, 2, and 3 is caused by the hormone that you have learned. For example, 1 is the result of insulin. Insulin causes a decrease in blood glucose level back to normal, while glucagon will cause an increase back to normal level. Then you can see that after some time, our glucose concentration will deplete. Let's say we fast, then our body will secrete more glucagon to break down glycogen into glucose. But in the case of the third slope, you can see that it's increased beyond normal level. So there's only a possible scenario for this to happen, and that is slope number 3 is caused by adrenaline, because adrenaline doesn't return things back into normal state. It actually increases the blood glucose level to beyond the normal level. So that is adrenaline. And let us just point out that for adrenaline, you have kind of touched it in the chapter of respiration, where we talk about the effect of nicotine. Nicotine will cause the increase of release of adrenaline, which is why it will result in quicker blood clotting. Next, let us look at some comic. You will see why later on. So here, Professor is telling Pikachu, Pikachu, you are an electric type. Pika, Pika. Charmander, you are a fire type. Charmander, Char. Then Snorlax came along and asked, what about me? I am Snorlax. It says type 2 down here. Type 2 diabetes. Oh, you need a diet. So the last part, we are going to talk about diabetes mellitus. You can just take it as diabetes. It doesn't matter whether it's mellitus or not. Okay, just take it as they are the same thing. So diabetes is caused by two things. One is you do not have enough insulin. The other one is your cell doesn't respond to insulin. So as a result, when blood glucose level increase, cells are unable to absorb the glucose. So as a result, this kind of thing will happen. Not very important. You just refer to the table that I'm going to show you later. There are two types of diabetes. The first is the insulin dependent. The other one is non-insulin dependence. We will go through the type 1 diabetes first. Then the Snorlax diabetes we go through later. So for type 1 diabetes, right, the isolate of Langerhans is unable to produce or secrete enough insulin. This could be due to genetic or autoimmune response. That means your cell kind of kill those cells in the isolate of Langerhans. The destruction of cell can also be due to virus infection. And because it's genetic, it can affect young people. The sign for 2 diabetes is the same. We just follow the syllabus outline. Important thing is increase in blood glucose level as well as presence of glucose in urine. And because those people are sensitive to insulin, we can just give them insulin to inject. But just take note, insulin, like I said, might not be a good thing, because if you look at people who inject insulin, you can see there's a lump at the site where they pierce their needle into. For Snorlax diabetes or type 2 diabetes, our cell actually produce insulin normally. Just that the target organ does not respond well to insulin. It could be due to reduced number of insulin receptor. Remember I mentioned in the chapter of cells, there are channel as well as receptor on cell surface. So those receptors are like mailbox. When insulin come and deliver the message of let us take in more glucose or let us convert glucose into glycogen, there are no mailbox for the insulin to mail the message to. So it will just be stuck outside. It cannot attach onto the receptor. The mail cannot go into non-existent mailbox. It is common among older people and Snorlax that is overweight. The sign is the same, increase in blood glucose level as well as presence of glucose in urine. For these people, it's a bit sad because their diet have to be controlled, such as reduce in carbohydrate, and if everything is still not good enough, we inject more insulin so that we have more insulin to try to bind to the receptor that are left. So that's all for the two types of diabetes.